A recent study of polar bear fossils suggests that during the last global deglaciation period, the species survived by utilizing Siberian and Canadian refugia. Welcome back to Paleopedia, and as we all know, polar bears are increasingly threatened by human-accelerated climate change. These hypercarnivores predominantly rely on vast amounts of sea ice during the summer and winter to survive as they feed on seals. To break it down, the less sea ice there is, the less polar bears we're going to see. And with recent simulations suggesting that ice cover will be completely absent during the summer months by 2050, more research is being looked into the polar bears' past to determine how they survived previous times of warm temperatures. Around 12 to 15,000 years ago, the Earth experienced what's called the late glacial, which is when the planet experienced significant ice loss of Scandinavian and North American ice sheets. A team of researchers from the University of Helsinki turned to fossils reported from various Scandinavian countries and islands off of Russia to determine the extended range of polar bears throughout this time period. The team determined that polar bears existed along the southernmost edge of the Scandinavian ice sheet, surviving into the Holocene, which is the present interglacial period that started around 12,000 years ago. During this time period, paleoenvironmental proxies suggest that the temperature average during this was between 6 and 10 degrees Celsius. As we move into this interglacial period, models suggest that sea ice cover between 8 and 10,000 years ago was comparable to the sea ice cover today. An area that seemed to support a large number of polar bears during this time period is Zhukov Island off of Russia, where they have found 130 individual polar bear remains. However, there was a time period between 5 and 9,000 years ago called the Holocene thermal maximum, which was when temperatures during the Holocene were at their highest. Polar temperatures were roughly 1.5 to 2.5 degrees Celsius warmer than they are currently today. And this coincides with a very notable absence of polar bear fossils throughout the region for this time frame. The team notes that fossils of polar bears from adjacent areas that are dated to 5 and 6,000 and 8 and 9,000 years ago suggest that the bears were seeking out cold refugia, areas that were persistently cooler than surrounding regions. Some of these areas include the East Siberian Sea, northern Greenland, and the Canadian archipelago. Fossils of polar bears on Alaska's Aleutian Islands suggest that that was about as far south as the bears could be during this time period, with the Aleutian Islands being as far south as ice would even be, if at all, during the winter. Therefore, the team theorizes that the bears were able to survive this seasonal ice limit time by seeking out areas like seal breeding grounds, evidenced by fossils of ringed seals that are associated with the polar bears. But as sea ice limited populations of seals are also starting to decline, the polar bears don't really seem to be adjusting their diet in order to compensate for the lack of their primary food. And the food sources that the bears are turning to, like terrestrial options, are not nutritionally complete for the bears, so they are losing body mass, which I've actually talked about before in this video. Now, while the Earth has been experiencing an overall cooling trend alongside expanding sea ice over the last 4,000 years, human-caused climate change is throwing a wrench into that, and as the planet begins to warm again, we may start seeing the polar bears begin to seek out those colder refugia in Canada and Siberia. If we do begin to see these bears seek out these areas, it's important that we figure out where they're going to end up so we can appropriately protect these colder refugia and save this iconic species of the North.